Hello folks. You can use various diagrams and problem-solving techniques not just on an organizational level but also down closer to where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. So that's what I'm going to do in this little session here. We're going to use the fishbone again, but I'm going to make it something that's a little more, like I said, down where the work actually takes place. So here we go with the fishbone. There's my unhappy little fish head there. Our main issue that I picked for this one here is going to be low production or poor pork production. I know I didn't hyphenate that in the right place, but the idea is poor production. How come either the quality isn't where it should be, or the productivity isn't where it should be, or for some other reason, perhaps the cost is too high. So we're going to draw our little fishbone here. I might have something like a marlin here with too many fish, too many bones on it, but anyhow, we'll see where it goes. And so there's a lot of factors that come into play that create a situation where you've got poor production. They can be such things as your machining parameters. Could be things like your machining parameters or your machine's rigidity, how tight, how solid is your machine here. Could be your skill level. Could be your, well, let's put down here your setup. That's how you have things, how the machine is set up, where your tool is, your jigs and fixtures, clamps and all these sorts of things here. Believe it or not, it could also be things like, not quite the same as skill level, but very related to it, your level of dexterity. Dexterity, there we go. Your dexterity, and I would include with that, how focused are you? It's easy, to be very distracted, and sometimes you're better at it than other times. So that can be a factor as well. Could also be such thing as your tooling, what tooling you have available. Related to that would be supplies, so I'm just going to put that down there too. Do you have the right tooling? Do you have the right supplies? Such as that. And there's other things that we could throw in there as well. Coming up here to your machining parameters, there's going to be bones that you attach to that. Right here, and that would be things like your depth of cut, what we like to call speeds and feeds in the industry, which includes your depth of cut, your inches per minute, or inches per revolution, depending on what kind of a machine you're running. And it'd be things like your lubricants or coolants. It's getting a little cluttered here. In some cases it could also be what we'd call your chip load. That's typically on something like a milling machine. Your chip load becomes a significant factor. With rigidity, well, I'm going to talk about that in just a minute here. Your skill level is, you might be a very skilled machinist, but are you comfortable with this operation on this machine with this material? So your skill level becomes a thing. Have you done this before? What's your history with it? Have you done this kind of work before? And that, like I said, here includes the operation and which machine you're doing it on. You might be running a CNC machine, and maybe you've spent your whole life on CNC machines, and you're very good at it, but you haven't run this one. So each machine, each manufacturer, they're designed a little bit differently, and you've got to, what I like to call the lay of the land. You've got to understand and be comfortable with where all the buttons are on the machine, all the wheels and the hand cranks and the levers and the, all these things. A lot of management thinks that if you've done the CNC work, or if you've done manual machines, or if you've done lathes, or you've done mills, or you're familiar with grinders, that you can run any of them in the world. And in fact, you probably can. But it takes a little while to get acclimated to it, to learn it and get familiar with it. So it's going to be the quirks that are with each machine, not just necessarily the quirks, but the, like I said, the lay of the land, and get familiar with things. It'd also be your setup. If you've got the right sort of jigs and fixtures, a lot of times those words are used interchangeably, and it'll be things like if you've got the right cutting tools. Oops, there we go. Cutting tools. This is getting very hard to read, so you really have to listen to the lecture as we go here, otherwise you're going to be completely lost in this maze. But if you've got the right cutting tools and work holding and all this sort of thing, it gets very complex. It's a huge field all its own. How well you stay focused on the job, if you've got your mind in the game here, so to speak. A lot of times when we get really good at what we're doing during the course of the day or the week or during the course of the job, we can let our minds wander, and we can kind of go all over the place with different thoughts, because our hands get that muscle memory, or whatever they call it, where you just get really good at clicking the levers and hitting the buttons and cranking the hand wheels and all this sort of thing. And next thing you know, you're going click, 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 and there goes one part, click, 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 and there goes another part, click, 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 there goes another one, and bang, 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 and that plays into your dexterity. How good are you with your fingers and your hands? Are you comfortable with what you're doing? A lot of times, a lot of companies say, wear your gloves, you gotta wear gloves, always gloves, goggles, earplugs, head helmets, and all this kind of stuff. Well, that's great in certain circumstances. In other circumstances, it's actually very dangerous. And the one thing I will say about gloves is, even though there's always a risk of cutting fingers and getting pinched and things like that, they inhibit your dexterity. And for a machinist, a lot of times running a machine with gloves on is actually very dangerous, because you lose so much of that dexterity that you just simply can't produce efficiently and productively if you've got gloves on. And that's something that really has to be thought about. You've got to be good at what you do and recognize as a machinist when gloves are essential and when they're dangerous. And it isn't a carte blanche or a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. Gloves don't work in your favor all the time, and you've got to recognize when that's the case and when it isn't. And then your tooling and supplies. I think that'll work for now. But in my next lecture, I think I'll talk a little bit about this rigidity issue, because it is essential in good machining to be efficient, to be safe, to be productive, make good use of every dollar that's spent on the shop, that the fundamentals of rigidity and how to hold things, both your tool and your workpiece, so that you get the work done safely, quickly, quality work, and minimal cost to the employer. Thank you very much. God bless you.